How did a god of poetry become one of the most respected figures among the war-obsessed Vikings? In a society that celebrated fearless warriors and epic battles, an entire deity was dedicated to poetry, music, and eloquence. His name was Bragi, and his story challenges our perceptions of Viking culture. This narrative explores how words shaped reputations, why satire could start a war, and why in the North, speech mattered as much as swords. The Norse sources describe Bragi as wise, eloquent, and unmatched in his command of words. In the Prose Edda, he's introduced as a figure renowned for wisdom and fluency of speech and skill with words, a deity who knows more about poetic craft than anyone else. Because of his mastery, skaldic poetry is called bragar, and men or women with outstanding eloquence are called bragar people. Bragi is usually described as a son of Odin and the giantess Gunnlod, though some sources suggest Frigg. His very name comes from bragar, meaning either poetry or the first noblest. He's the husband of Idun, the goddess who keeps the apples of immortality. In this marriage of eloquence and youthfulness, poetry literally sustains the gods. Bragi's tongue is one of the places where runes are carved according to the poem Sigurdri Fumal, suggesting his speech carries magical power. Scholars have debated whether the god began as a deified human poet. A historical skald named Bragi Boddason, the earliest known Nordic poet, served 9th century kings, and some suggest he was later elevated to divine status. Whether deity or deified bard, Bragi embodies the prestige of poetry in the Viking imagination. To understand why poetry mattered, we need to look at its mythical origin. After a truce between warring gods, their spit formed a man named Kvasir. He was so wise that dwarves murdered him and brewed his blood into a magical drink. Anyone who tasted this mead became a poet and a scholar. The giant Suttung hid the brew in a mountain, guarded by his daughter Gunnlod. Odin, determined to possess it, seduced Gunnlod and stole the mead, fleeing as an eagle and spitting it out into containers for the gods. The Mead of Poetry therefore links eloquence with wisdom and magic. As the scholar Herstwick notes, the story highlights how poetry, knowledge, runes, and magic were seen as interrelated facets of Odin's power. Bragi, though not the thief, becomes the custodian of this sacred art. His name even serves as the word for poetry in Old Norse. Contrary to the stereotype of Vikings as mindless marauders, their society understood the power of words. In Viking culture, reputation, or ordstyr, was the only part of a person deemed eternal. Ancient poems say men hoped to die in a way that ensured people would speak their names after death. Words could elevate someone to lasting glory, or destroy them through enide, slander, mockery, or shame. A man was obliged to respond vigorously to such insults or risk being ostracized. These were not empty taunts. The Herstwick study notes that people were prepared to kill or die over spoken words. Runes and poetry gave speech permanence, amplifying its power and allowing praise or shame to travel far and last long. Laws reflected this seriousness. Icelandic law codes forbade composing or even reciting half a stanza of defamatory verse, and some insulting poems gave the victim the right to kill in retaliation. The seriousness of libel is vividly illustrated by the knitting pole. Egil Skallagrimsson once raised a pole topped with a horse's head, carved runes cursing King Eric and Queen Gunhilda, and called upon guardian spirits to drive them from their land. Such curse poles or nidstong were used to shame enemies, and the libelous verses carved upon them were crimes punishable by outlawry. Poetry thus had the force of magic and law. Norse poets, known as skalds, were more than entertainers. They composed intricate verses in strict meters using heiti and kennings, metaphorical language that replaced everyday words. Their poems praised kings, recounted history, and, importantly, satirized opponents. Less formal forms of skaldic verse included dream songs, magic curses, and flytings. Flyting was a ritual exchange of eloquent insults, an art form where poets traded accusations of cowardice, perversion, or illegitimacy before an audience. The word of the week explains that winners were chosen by the crowd and then toasted, while the losers shared the drink, a public performance where reputations were on the line. The English verb to scold derives from scald, reflecting how the role of poet as satirist left its mark on our language. Because words mattered so much, even kings participated. Herstwick notes that some insulting verses could provoke military retaliation. After a Danish bailiff confiscated an Icelandic ship's cargo, Iceland's lawmakers ordered everyone to compose a scandalous Aeneid verse about the Danish king. He prepared to invade Iceland in response. Legal codes prohibited libelous poetry, and terms like skaldfiffle, libeler, and skaldstong, libel pole, appear in law books. In this world, the difference between honor and disgrace rested on a single stanza. Bragi's most famous myth underscores how poetry could defend honor without swords. In the poem Lokasenna, set after Baldur's death, Loki bursts into a feast uninvited. Bragi, acting as guardian of etiquette, tells him he is not welcome. When Odin overrules him, Bragi offers Loki his sword, horse, and golden arm ring as a peace gift. Loki responds by calling Bragi a coward and claiming he fears fighting more than any other Aesir or elf. Bragi's reply shows his restraint. He says that outside the hall he would take Loki's head, yet inside he does not rise to the bait. Idun tries to calm her husband, but Loki then insults her by hinting that she embraced her brother's killer. The exchange continues until Thor arrives and silences Loki with threats. In this episode, Bragi never raises a weapon. His offers of gift and his threats are verbal. He relies on wit and social ritual rather than physical force. Loki's attack highlights how being called a coward was among the worst insults. The scene is a flyting between a trickster and the god of poetry, demonstrating that mastery of words could be as confrontational as combat. Despite Loki's jibes, Bragi remained revered. There are no surviving myths of him fighting, yet he's depicted welcoming warriors to Valhalla. His absence from battles, even during Ragnarök, shows that physical valor was not the only measure of worth in Norse myth. Bragi's story reveals a dimension of Viking culture often overlooked. While the sagas glorify warriors, the same society venerated poets and orators. Words held legal, magical, and social weight. Reputation was more lasting than life, and poetry was the medium through which memory endured. In the Prose Edda, Snorri describes Bragi as excellent in wisdom and the greatest at eloquence and word skill. People of exceptional eloquence were called Bragar because of him. This respect extended beyond myth. Historical kings boasted that they could both fight and compose poetry, while professional skalds were welcome at courts. And the reverence for speech shows up in the laws against libel and in the rituals of flyting and knithing poles. As the Herstwick article concludes, Vikings were prepared to kill or die over words. Poetry amplified the power of speech, preserving both praise and shame. In an era without mass media, verses were the network that carried news, fame, and scandal across the north. Bragi, the god who never fought yet, whose tongue bore runes, embodies this truth. In the Viking age, speech could build empires or topple kings. His myth invites us to see the ancient North, not just as a world of iron and blood, but as a culture where the sharpest weapon might be a well-crafted verse.